G'day there. I just wanted to do a bit of a scope review for you guys today. So what I've done, I've got my two scopes here. I'll get them both on the screen for you. We have a DSO201 and a DSO203. And this little guy's pretty cheap and basic. It cost me about $60 on eBay. It was my first scope. It served me well for a couple of weeks, but pretty quickly I found myself wanting some extra bandwidth. This one's flat out displaying anything over about 100 kilohertz. What we're seeing on both screens at the moment, they are both hooked up to the waveform generator function of this scope, which is set on 8 megahertz square wave, which I think that's as fast as it goes. Now, and you can see on this scope we're not even getting a waveform. It's showing some little tiny dips and bumps. You can't even see it. This scope, that's not a square wave. Should be a square wave. That's what the generator's putting out. So let's see what our bandwidth really is. I've seen adverts for these up to 70 megahertz bandwidth. That's clearly false. That's at 4 megahertz. 2 megahertz, we should be seeing a square wave here. 1 megahertz, we're starting to see a square wave. You see this little bump? And there's a corresponding bump on the other end of the waveform. That's actually the calibration of the internal variable capacitors. I've tried to jazz them up and adjust them. That's about as good as it's going to get. Wrong channel. So let's change that time frame. So you can see we're starting at around 500 to a megahertz. We start getting a square wave. At 2 megahertz, it's looking pretty shabby. Right, now if we look at this other scope, around the same points, it's just starting to at 2 megahertz actually showing that there is a waveform. 1 megahertz, it's still pretty rough. We have to drop this right down. That's 100 kilohertz it's displaying on this one. I'll just set it on its automatic function, which is about the only redeeming feature of this scope. It's the fit feature, which lets it actually zoom in on a waveform, except it's gone too far on the voltage and the time divisions. So at 100 kilohertz, we're starting to see a waveform that's vaguely square. So really, that little one, all it's good for, about 50 kilohertz. 50 to 100 kilohertz at best. This one, I like it up to about a meg, as long as you're aware that to watch out for the little dips and spikes that are due to calibration issues. The waveform generator on this one is quite nice. It also does a sine wave, which we'll see if I zoom that time frame out. Everything other than square, though, only goes to 20 kilohertz. So that displays quite nicely on the other scope there too. Yeah, seeing quite nice sine wave on both. We can also do a triangle wave. A sawtooth, as you can see it. 20 kilohertz, it displays fine on this other little scope. It's great up to about 50 or 100k. Great little scope. And there's the square again. The other thing I would like to point out is the digital channels on this. It's advertised as a 4-channel scope, but you really only get 2 channels. I'll stick channel 1 and channel C, and I'll leave channel A plugged in for reference. Now if I go and make channel C visible, you'll notice it's not showing a waveform, even though it's hooked up. No purple waveform. Because it's digital, it's only for measuring ons and offs. If that was a proper AC waveform and was dipping below negative, it would be showing me switching on and off. There has no way. Look, there's where it's got the voltage scale on the other 2 channels, there's nothing on channels C and D. They're pretty much useless. About the only redeeming feature there is the maths function on channel D, which can do A plus B and A minus B. On C and D, which is also completely C divided by D, which is both totally useless. Alright, so even the maths function, there's no A times B, so you can't do watts. You can work out losses and things like that, but that's about it. It's not very helpful at all. But it does do 2 channels, which to me is great because it means I can do my own RMS power measurements. They're not super accurate. The voltage range does go out of calibration very quick. Even when it's recently calibrated, the best I've had, it's about 4% accuracy. It's often out by as much as 10%, which can be a bit depending on what you're measuring. Sometimes you don't mind so much. As long as you're aware of the limitations, I've found it a great little scope for the price that I paid for it. That's about it for now, all I can think of, but I'll just show you quickly. I don't know if I think I did the fast sine waves. So there we go, that's at 2 megahertz. We're getting pretty bumpy on both those waveforms there. Okay, so that's at 1 megahertz. And again, it depends a bit on where you put your voltage scale. And I know that that little spike and that little dip are both due to poorly calibrated capacitors in the back here. You just can't get them any better than that. So, as long as you know what you're doing, it's not bad. But if you've got the money to get a better scope, I'd highly recommend getting a much higher bandwidth one with 2 channels. But hey, it does the job. It's got some nice little, yeah, if I can remember how to get there, bits down the side that do some counting for me. You can show me RMS, screen's getting really dirty there, max voltage, min, frequency, cycle time, so that'll display the amount of time that it's on for, duty cycle percentage, there's some time measurement points. I can move these dotted lines around, there's some vertical ones too, and I can take different measurements. They're also displayed up here. That voltage and time display in the top right corner there are actually measurements between the 2 dotted lines. I can show that on any channel. Frames per second for the update display even. Voltage DC, so it's got some nice little features. I really like it, but I'm still hanging out for a better scope too. So I hope that helps you if you're trying to buy a scope and trying to make some decisions. Thanks for watching.